So I'm Michael Anderson, and my professional career summary is basically that I worked construction internationally for 6 years. And about the time that I was wrapping that up, I was at that young age where you want to make a difference in the world. So I had a degree in sociology. I came home, we had 2 kids, and we started having foster kids. And we had 13 foster kids. Some of the hardest kids you can imagine. They smoked, swore, stole, lied, and most of them had been to 2 or 3 other foster homes, and ours was kind of the next one as they were trying to find a place. And I can honestly say I learned more from those girls. They were all girls. Once you start in foster care, once you start with girls, it's like you can't switch to guys. So, but I learned more from them than I actually did from grad school. It was a very rich experience, and the change in them spurred me on to decades of working with teenagers and actually co-writing this book with a pediatrician. I have it here. If anything I say interests you, most of it's in the book. Some of it isn't. But today I wanted to talk about that we talk too much. There's a lot of messages in our culture that we need to talk more, we need to communicate more, but actually I think we talk too much. And I want to talk about that, and the reason is, and where this talk is going to evolve into, is really a talk about shame. Because shame comes from words, and our over-talking contributes to shame. Megan was one of our foster kids, and she was a tough one. And I knew she was up to something, and I knew what she was up to. I knew she had a boyfriend. And I knew that the way she was, that she was going to do anything to go see that boyfriend. So I'm just starting grad school. I've got a big paper due the next day. But my paper isn't where I'd like it to be. And I hear something outside, and I discover that Megan has snuck out of the house to meet her boyfriend. And it's about 10:30, and pretty soon it's 11, it's 12, I'm exhausted, I need sleep, I can't go to sleep, I can't call the police because the police don't want to hear from you unless the kid's been gone longer. It's 1 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock, and I'm filling with anger. Partly, like all anger, a big part of anger, you guys, is when we don't know what to do. We get angry when somebody puts us in a situation we don't know how to handle. And we think we're angry, but it's really that I just don't know what to do. I'm exhausted. I need to sleep. She's out there. I knew she was going to go see her boyfriend. She did it. She made a fool out of me. She embarrassed me. Finally, about 3 in the morning, a squad car pulls up in the driveway. And Megan comes to the door, and my thought was, it'd probably be prudent to not strangle her till the cop leaves.
Probably.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about how I'm going to handle this and what I'd like to say to her. And my wife's standing next to me at 3 in the morning, and she says, "Megan, I'm so glad you're safe. We've been worried about you. There's nothing to say to you that we can't say tomorrow. Why don't you go up to your room?" And I thought, wow, being quiet is really powerful. And since then, many things have happened. I watch couples all the time. You guys, in your chapters, you ever notice there's a really powerful moment when everyone's silent? I wonder how a group would even connect if they sat for an hour and just felt their feelings together. But we keep talking, and we keep talking, and we keep talking. I was giving a talk one time, and a mom raised her hand. I said, "Are there any questions?" And she said, "Yeah, I have a question. my daughter is really mean to her brother and I can't get her to say she's sorry. And I said, well, why do you care if she says she's sorry? She said, well, shouldn't I? I said, no. And I said, why do you care if she says she's sorry? So she'll stop being mean. I said, so what you care about is that she stop being mean. See, here's the thing. Here's the test. Would you rather she was sorry and kept being mean, or would you rather she wasn't sorry and stopped being mean? Well, I'd rather she wasn't sorry and she stopped being mean. So the critical variable in this story is not whether she's sorry, it's whether she stops doing something. There's a concept called a teachable moment. I really have come to disagree with that. Probably the worst time to talk to your daughter about a sloppy job of mowing the lawn is right after she finished mowing the lawn. The best time is 3 days later. By the way, Saturday when you mowed the lawn before you went to your friends, that quality of job isn't going to work next week. That's all we need to say. Here's a good idea for people that really believe in talking. Let's say you've been married 30 years and your wife believes that your family is a family of narcissists. Sit down with her and have a good long talk and tell her that the real problem is that her family are codependents. That'll bring you very close together. You'll have a really warm, intimate time. But see, the thing is about that, it isn't just that we don't talk because we're scared or we're walking on eggshells. We shouldn't talk because there's nothing to talk about. So she thinks my family's narcissists. That doesn't mean they are. That's just her opinion. She doesn't get to fill out a report card on my family. And if she sought that for 30 years, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to change it. We get kind of turfy when we talk sometimes, and we want to convince somebody. There's a beautiful concept that I love, that everything we say just about everything we say has a learn or a get motive. So, if my wife said to me, could you get bread and milk on your way home, that's a get motive. If she said, how was your day, that would be a learn motive. But there's hundreds of things that we don't know what the motive is by the words. So, if she said, I suppose you're working late again, I don't know if that means get home or she wants to learn what time I'm coming home. But here's the thing. The more a relationship is stressed, the more it gravitates towards the get side. Really bad marriages, when they come in, everything they say is to get somebody to do something, to hear something, to understand something. And the energy for learn about me or learn about you is gone. One thing you'll learn about every conversation that's good is that it's birthed from authentic curiosity. You will not have probably very many good conversations in your life where one or both of you is not curious. If you're curious, it would make sense that you'd want to learn about somebody. So, there's a lot of false premises around talking. And a lot of times the talking really takes us further from the truth. I was at a conference one time getting continuing education, and a therapist came up, and I don't know if any of you are therapists, but we have continuing ed requirements, and he was a psychologist, and he came up and he brought a couple with him. Now, I can't understand why people go on Dr. Phil for counseling, but I also don't understand why a couple would come in front of a group of 70 therapists to do a counseling session. So the therapist, his name was Tom, and he says, what's painful for you, Ann, about this relationship? And she says, well, I'm dying of loneliness. Steve won't talk to me. And he says, Steve, why won't you talk to Ann? She doesn't want to hear what I have to say. Ann, is that true? No, he's my husband. I love him. Of course I want to hear what he has to say. So this goes on for about 20 minutes. We're about to break for lunch. Tom thanks Steve and Ann, and he says, are there any questions? I raised my hand and I said, Ann, thanks for coming. It took a lot of courage for you to come here, but it's really been helpful for me. But I have a question for you. About 20 minutes ago, Tom asked you, is that true that you don't want to hear what your husband has to say? And you said, of course not. He's my husband. I love him. And this is what I asked her. I wonder what your answer would be if you took truth serum. And she looked at the crowd and she said to 70 therapists, no, I don't want to hear what he has to say. He bores me to death. So the whole therapy session was a fraud. But that's sometimes what talking does. I'm not against talking. I'm trying to balance the scale here today. Some of you that are parents or grandparents, I want to talk to you about talking too much. This happened to me last year and it just blew me away. There's a woman I was working with and she knew my book better than I did. She'd read it 3 times and I would ask her what chapter a certain story was in and she'd tell me because I couldn't remember. And every week she would come in and she'd tell me what bothered her about her kids and why she didn't do what the book said. So one week she came in and I said, instead of talking about what Joey did this week, let's talk about why week after week after week you don't do what you know to do or what you say that you believe about the book. And I was quiet. I try to be really quiet when I counsel people. Just give them time. She was quiet. She reaches over and she grabs a tissue off the end table. She starts to cry and she's wiping her makeup. And she said, I know exactly why I don't do what the book said. I said, why? And she says, if I parented the way Jis said, I wouldn't be involved enough in my kid's life to take credit for his success. One of the reasons parents talk too much is because they want to be relentlessly involved in their kid's life. That sounds crazy until you understand that they relentlessly love their kids. But we have to get to the point where we understand language and we understand talk for what it is, and that it can be destructive and it can be beneficial. And we don't need to hear from somebody something that isn't true or something that we already know. Another thing about talking is that after we've heard something 6 or 8 times, we just don't hear it. I was giving a talk similar to this in Cincinnati a couple of years ago, and I went to the Cincinnati airport on my way home, and the PA system just kept repeating this message over and over and over. So I got up to the Delta counter and I said to the woman, did you even hear what they said? And she said, no, I block it out. I've worked here for 3 years. I don't hear that anymore. And that's what kids do too. So it's another reason to be selective about what we say to kids. The last thing I want to say before I get into shame is that we get preoccupied with why. And why can be very important, but usually it's not. My daughter, the one I talked about in the big group, she came home one day and she had a speeding ticket. And she said, Dad, I got a speeding ticket and it's $85. And I said, okay. She said, do you want to know why I was speeding? said, not really. Well, does it matter if I'm sorry? Not really. Well, will you say something? I said, yeah, we're good. Just don't speed again. That's all. Do I really need to know why she was speeding? Couldn't I pretty much guess that she was late to where she was going or that she was playing the music? Asking my son when he was little why he got up after we'd put him to bed is kind of a waste of time. I pretty much knew why he got up. So, I want to show you what I've learned the hard way, having grown up in a shame-based family. A shame-based family is a family where the mistakes you make and your failures are who you are. So that was the family that I grew up in. And shame-based vocabulary is, say that a kid's room is a mess. You're a slob. Okay, that's shame-based because the kid isn't the room's the room. So we live in a shame-based culture, partly because it's so stinking, comparative. We're always comparing stuff in our culture. And we get trained. I mean, the worst is teenage girls. They're comparing themselves hours every day. But it's true for us too. We see an investment commercial on TV and we see a guy well-dressed and fit, maybe early 70s, going out to his boat. And we compare ourselves to that and we can feel defective. We see somebody that's married walking down the street with their wife and maybe I'm divorced or something, and we compare ourselves and we feel shame that I'm less than because of that other person's story. Shame is a powerful thing, and it drives addiction, it drives depression, it drives poor conversation, it makes us live in fear. And I grew up in that. And what I found was, working with my foster kids, is that shame is birthed from words. And as skilled as I was incapable of talking very long without reshaming a kid. So I started practicing talking as little as possible. And how that would look was, let's say a dad had a 6 and an 8-year-old. And he says, we're going to go to the beach as soon as you guys pick up your toys. So he gathers a couple towels and he gets his car keys and he sits down and the kids are watching TV and goofing around and he sits there and he sits there and he sits there and he sits there. When are we going to the beach? Just go like that. And eventually the kids pick up the toys. And as long as the dad didn't say anything, shame was not perpetuated. It was just a consequence. I've told you 8 times to pick up your toys. Stop picking up the toys for your sister. It's her job. Why do we care if somebody picked up the toys for their sister? We just have all these thoughts in our heads, and that's really what this talk was designed to be. I want you to rethink some of these things after you've left. What do I say that really needs to be said? And what do I say that I never really reflected on? When I was in grad school, the first day I was really shocked. The department head said, all of your papers in grad school are due at 4 o'clock. If they're not in at 4 o'clock, you will be docked 1 grade. And we don't care why it's late. So if you have 2 sets of railroad tracks between you and the school, you might want to leave enough time for a freight train with 700 cars. Because we don't care. And I was first thinking, whoa. You don't care why I was late? No, we don't care. But what if I have a good reason? They're all good reasons. Or there are no good reasons. You're just late. I wondered how they would do that. And it was really funny because they put a box out in front of whatever professor's papers were due, right outside his door. And then each professor had an assistant. And at 4:01, this hand would reach out from the door and grab the box and pull it in and close the door. That was it. So, my daughter, who was delightful but challenging, used to come home late. And I said, here's the deal. You need to be home by 12. I'm going to set an alarm clock in the hallway upstairs for 12:05. If you get home in time to shut off the alarm before it goes off, you can use the car next week. If you're not home in time to shut it off, you lose the car next week, and we're not going to talk about it. So at 11:59, I hear her car race into the driveway. She flies into the house. She's going upstairs on all fours and reaches out and smacks the top of the alarm clock to shut it off. And she didn't know, and she may not know till today, but I was laying awake in bed hoping she'd be late. But see, none of that takes talking. So, I want to explain to you what happens here, and I want you to track with me. I'm going to read just a little bit from my book here, because I can maybe tell the story better the way it's written. Picture yourself out on a drive some night very near your home. There's no traffic, and the visibility is clear, and without really thinking, you start speeding. A local policeman checks you at 12 miles an hour over and turns on his flashing lights. As you see him in the rearview mirror, you glance at your speedometer and see that you've crept up to 12 miles over the speed limit. At that moment, you know that it's too late. You wonder for a brief second if there's any way to reverse what just happened the last 2 minutes and realize that can't be done. You can't undo something that's already happened. As the officer approaches, you roll down the window, hoping that you'll just get a warning, but knowing that that's not likely. As you hear the officer's footsteps approach, your more realistic plan is to get the ticket, get it fast, and get it over with. You can pay the $85 and deal with the insurance ramifications later. You're just glad there wasn't a serious problem, no one got hurt. You want to hear the damages and get on with your life. The policeman comes up to the window and says, I hope you're not in a hurry, because I think it's time for us to have a good long talk. I'd like to talk to you about what you've done and who you've become. I expect some people around here to speed, but really, I expected more from you. You live around here, and you know there's kids outside at night. You even have kids in this neighborhood. I saw you go by 2 weeks ago about 8 miles an hour over the speed limit, and I let it go, but I was wrong about you. You're not the kind of person that can learn from grace. You need a ticket to learn a lesson, and on it goes. Then he adds, while I've got you here, I've noticed your dog out in the street unleashed on a couple occasions. And once I went by, your garage door was open, and your garage is really getting messy. Slowly at first, then more rapidly, a rage starts to build inside you. There are kids out at night in this neighborhood, but you weren't going to hit a kid. The visibility was perfect. And what did the officer mean when he said, you are the type of person that needs a ticket? How does he know what kind of person I am? Soon you're thinking about all the burglaries and DUIs that have happened in your municipality in the past year, and the officer should be concerning himself with. Your defenses kick in, resentment fills your mind, and the words form in your head just like they did when you were a child. Just shut up. What just happened in this interchange? Let's break it down. When you first saw the lights in the mirror, your first emotion was regret. You felt sorry for the choice you'd made, and that was followed by the wish and the hope that you might not get what you deserved, and that the officer would give you grace. That lasted only a few seconds. An acceptance and owning of what you'd done, and a healthy willingness to pay the consequence followed. Finally, you had a brief awareness that despite the visibility, a minor distraction could have resulted in a mistake with dire consequences. A consequence much more dire than a ticket. This was the best possible outcome from the speeding incident. Just a speeding ticket, healthy regret, an adequate wake-up call, and for you to pay more attention to your driving. But you also got a long lecture from the policeman, and it made your blood boil. The lecture changed the dynamic totally. What if the officer had simply said, "Hello, did you know you were speeding? You may be a careful driver, but at 12 over, I can't let it pass." The officer's good long talk pretty much guaranteed that the outcome would go in a different direction. That's what happens. That's what blame does. That's how it shows up as shame. I want to talk about shame in the time that we have here and why so few people heal from shame. So what I'm going to show you in the next 10 minutes took me 20 years to learn. And so, anyway, I learned it by listening over and over and over to people that grew up like I did. So we have a scale here of 0 to 100, about an imaginary scale about how well I'm doing at life. And 90 to 100 is what I long to be, or what my parents told me I should be, which is hardworking, kind, quiet, helpful, others, thinking. So this isn't really who I was. This is just who I hoped I was. This is who I pretended that I was. And then there was this column over here from 0 to 10, which was selfish, stupid, lazy, inconsiderate. And it wasn't really that. By the way, I can't spell. A little note about that. Until I was about 40, I felt embarrassed about not being able to spell. And I was doing a talk one time, and I just decided I'm not going to be embarrassed anymore. I had a reading disability growing up, and I get letters mixed up in my head, so that's just it. Which is interesting because as we're talking about shame, my mom was an English teacher and an English major, and she thought that an IQ test was a waste of time because the best way to tell how smart somebody was how well they could spell. So that's what I grew up with. So here we are, and I'm hoping to be this, and I realize I'm not. So now we have 83% here, and I called this the slip zone. And the slip zone is where I'm losing my ability to hold on to the belief that this is who I am. It's slipping out of my hands. I've been a little too selfish, I've been a little too angry. Somebody confronted me, and I'm really vulnerable here because when I get down to 83, I can't lose any more points. And this is the point I wanted to make for you to understand shame. What shame does where shame comes from, we could talk about, and different speakers have mentioned shame today, but what shame does is it removes the middle from our life. So when I'm full of shame, and when I grow up in a shame system, I hit this slip zone and I'm vulnerable, so I get defensive, and I get in denial, and I get testy, because I can't lose one more point. I'm living basically pass fail. Any little thing like, I thought you were going to clean the garage this weekend. No, anybody should be allowed to say that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But when I'm at 83%, I'm so vulnerable, and the reason I'm vulnerable is because there is no 82%. That doesn't exist in a shame person. So once you hit 83, instead of going to 82, you go down to 5. Now this is me. Now the same thing happens going the other way. Time goes by, a couple days go by, and I go, wow. Just like I said over here, I'm not quiet, helpful, others thinking, kind, and hardworking. I just watched 7 hours of football and didn't help anybody. So then I start doing the same thing on this side. Well, I'm not selfish, stupid, lazy, and inconsiderate. So I have a negative slip zone. So this is 17%, and now I'm here. And if I get to 17, if I can get one more point, I go up to 95. And we live like that for over and over and over. So if you add it up, if I did my math right, we've got 17% here and 17% there. That's 34%. So we're 66% in the middle that we're missing. So we're missing 66%. The problem is that for most of us, I'll raise my hand, this 66% really represents 100% of life. Because I'm never as good a person as I think I am on the days I think I'm tough shit. And I'm never as bad a person as I think I am when I think I'm this. When I'm working with people that are shame-based, what I try to teach them is to get to the middle. And the reason that they're not growing is because when they feel this, somebody comes in and they're having a shame attack, and maybe they've looked at pornography, or maybe they've had an affair, or that maybe there's something. Especially in small groups, people try to get you to feel better about this by telling you you're that. And you're not that either. So the lie perpetuates. And years and years and years can go by. And what we need to do, I'm looking at my notes here. I want to tell you what this looks like. I'm in my office having a session with somebody, and occasionally I have a family session. And there's mom, and there's 2 boys, and there's dad. And the purpose of the session is to say to dad, your anger is disrupting our family. So one of the sons starts and says, Dad, your anger is disrupting our family and scaring me. I'm not angry. How can you say I'm angry? Can't anybody express their emotions? So he's sitting right here, right at 83. The other son says, Dad, yeah, you are angry. Well, I get mad sometimes, but I'm not angry. Dad, you are. And you're not fun to be around when you're angry. I don't think I'm more angry than anybody else. You guys are just picking on me. Dad, we called this meeting. We're here because we love you. And we want you to know that you're angry, and your anger scares us. So Dad says, well, fine, I'll just move out. Okay, you see what just happened there? Right in front of me, he says, fine, I'll just move out. If nobody appreciates me, I'll find another place to live. I can live with my brother. So what was happening is he came in right in his slip zone. His two sons confronted him. He held out at 83 as long as he could, and he jumped to 5. Last winter in Minnesota, we have legendary winters, and I'm just telling you, if you move to Minnesota, you better like winter. Because you won't like it there if you don't. But I'm at the grocery store, and I happen to notice a completely put together professional woman coming out. And she looked assertive, confident. I happened to notice her because, I don't know why, but she just had that look of somebody that had maybe $1,000 outfit on, a wool coat, really together. I thought, that's a professional. I bet, I don't know, is she a doctor, an attorney, or something? She comes out with her cart and slips on the ice, falls on her butt, and I'm walking through, I'm about 5 feet away, and she says, God damn stupid idiot, I can't believe I did this. What an idiot, I can't believe it. You're so stupid. And she's talking to herself. She comes out of the store, maybe at 86%. She slips on the ice, and now this is her? How much sense does that make? But I know that happens. Now, there's an interesting thing about shame if you want to kind of understand it, and I'm just giving you a little introduction today, but the kid that drops out of high school, uses drugs, and joins a gang can be just as shame-driven as the valedictorian or the quarterback of the football team. There's this concept that's called the positive shame cycle and the negative shame cycle. And basically, the positive shame cycle is the people that are tortured by shame, but they can pull it off. They're an A student, they're going to Harvard, they're a quarterback of the team, and they don't look shame-driven. There's another bunch of people, so those are the people that can live up in this area, let's say 92% of the time. They can hold this illusion together. Then there's the high school dropout kid, and 92% of the time they hold this together. And they look really different, but shame is really driving both of them. So, anyway, that's kind of an overview of shame. I wanted to finish on time here, but I also wanted to leave you a few minutes for questions. Wow, hands pop up. What?
I've heard you allude a couple of times, and obviously in your background there's some shame. Can you tell a little bit of your story?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. Thanks for asking. First of all, I guess looking back, this would be my journey out of shame. And I would say that I'm pretty much out of shame now. But the first step of getting out of shame was I knew that my family was messed up, how they thought about people. The comments they made about people that were overweight, the comments that they made about people in bad marriages, there was a judgment to that. And when I recognized that they had lost credibility, then I wondered what else they told me that wasn't true. So that was the first part of my journey. The second part of my journey was driving around repeatedly over and over, putting myself in the middle. Every time my wife would compliment me, I would say to myself, I'm not as good as you're making me sound. And every time she would insult me, I would tell myself, I'm not as bad as she's making me sound. And I would, over and over, thousands and thousands of times when I was driving my car, I would think, I'm a partly good, partly bad person that's partly a good friend that sometimes lets my friends down, that can be a decent brother, but sometimes I ignore my sister. And I just kind of, see the way the brain works, if we study brain chemistry, is we have all this potential for thought, but what happens is we overwear out certain thought patterns. So if we grow up and our thoughts follow that pattern, it's like a superhighway in our brain. And we gravitate towards that. We process it. Anything, information that sounds like the superhighway, we put on the superhighway. And so if we're going to change how we think, we have to practice over and over and over to not go here, but to actually take that thought up this way. And so that's how I kind of did that. And I you know, to be honest, it's kind of cheating when I get paid every day to think about life. So I learned a lot from my clients, really. Because I recognized myself in them, and then it was easier for me to change. Yeah.
So in your
Go ahead.
speech, you mentioned
Just a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. Your daughter came in and told you that she has a ticket,
Yeah.
speeding ticket, and she wants to tell you. She wants to tell you why she got a speeding ticket, and you didn't give her that chance.
Right.
Now I know what you're saying, but don't you think that on her part she wanted some kind of relief in explaining herself? She will get a personal relief that she actually explained, even though it's no big deal to you, everything is fine. I mean, I'm sure she knows you. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Because me, sometimes I want to explain to my wife, even though I know she'll forgive me, why this happened, why I was not able to pick up this. Why it gives me relief that she listened to my explanation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And his question, if you didn't hear, was, why did I say I didn't want to hear why my daughter was speeding? And one thing, I know my daughter. And the second thing is this. I'll illustrate it this way. Let's say I'm parking downtown and I put my car, and actually the technology could do this now, but I put my car in a place that has 30-minute parking. And I get a call on my cell phone, and it's the parking meter person. And they said, from your license plate, I was able to get your cell phone, and I called you, and you've been in a 30-minute parking spot for 40 minutes, and I'd like to know why. Now, the first thing I think of when that parking person asks me that is, they wouldn't ask me unless there was a good reason why. So the first thing I'm thinking is, what's the good enough reason? My hip went out. I went to the eye doctor and I've been waiting all this time in the waiting room. So the very question of why presumes that there's a good enough reason why. And with my daughter, she was wanting me to buy into the fact that there was a good enough reason. Just like I would do if the meter person called me and said, why are you still here? My thought would be, they wouldn't call unless there's the right answer. So, somebody else.
So to tag on that, what strikes me is if I don't want to know why, is that actually giving the other person respect in that you're an adult, I trust your judgment, you'll figure it out, I trust you.
Exactly.
Is it a matter of respect?
And that's why I said to my daughter, hey, we're good.
Yeah.
You don't have to repair anything here.
So that's conferring confidence in who they are.
I hope so. That would be my hope. I never thought that there was a bad reason you were speeding. So whatever your reason is isn't going to change my mind.
Who paid the ticket?
She did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you said a couple times early on that you didn't feel the need to hear "I'm sorry." I guess, obviously, you've been at this for a long time. Is that part of the shame thing? Do you feel people can be repentant and recover? Or, I guess that's it. Maybe I'm looking for repentance which forces shame. Or do you believe people can recover without first being sorry for what they're doing?
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, there's a good answer. What I think is a powerful answer to that. I did a word study in Scripture on sorry, and there's no equivalent of an apology or sorry in Scripture. There's two references to sorry, and one is sorrow, and one is repentance, which means to go a different direction. So I'm meeting a friend who's always late at Starbucks, and they come late and they say, I'm sorry. Okay, so there's no sorrow and there's no repentance. Repentance would mean, if they were repentant, that would mean that that was the last time they were going to be late. But they're going to be late next time. So in our culture, especially the Christian culture with parents, this word sorry is really meaningless. Because it has two things. I mean, oh man, I would be fighting back tears if a kid was repentant about hitting his sister. But that would mean that he's in sorrow about what he's done.
But what about confession? That's scriptural. Confess your faults, or to acknowledge that, like in our family, we try anyway to get our kids to admit that what they did was wrong. Whether or not they're sorry about it, at least to...
My point, I don't care one way or another about sorry. My point is that the critical variable in the story is not whether they're sorry. The critical variable is if they stop hitting their sister, or if my daughter stops speeding. And so I'm just trying to stay clear about the dynamic that's happening in front of me.
But what do you do with the directive to confess?
To acknowledge that this is wrong.
I mean, there is a directive to do that. How do you negotiate that with the wisdom that you see in...
Well, that's a long way from tell your brother you're sorry.
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, anybody that's raised enough kids knows that that doesn't change anything. So, confession is, I think, powerful if there's some self-awareness. And it doesn't have to be sorry. It could be, let's say that I made a racial comment, and all of a sudden the light goes on, and I realized that was a very culturally insensitive comment. I shouldn't have said that. That's an awareness. That's an acknowledgement. If I said I'm sorry when I learned something and saw it different, yeah, that would be fine. But the way sorry, I'm just talking about how it's used in our culture. I'm sorry I was late.
So you're saying what we call confession isn't really effective at all?
I'm saying,
if it's sorry.
He doesn't create shame.
Yeah.
I'm saying that, yeah, when the way a flippant I'm sorry is used in our culture, it's fairly meaningless. And it's not the critical variable of the story.
And it would even inoculate you because you think you've done something and you're worse off than you.
So how many people are in the middle? How many people are healthy and see their lives appropriately?
Well, I think, it isn't so much like that. It's more like a few years back, I went on a walk with 7 other men. And we walked 55 miles in 5 days. And our goal was to talk and be as honest as we could. So I think everybody on that walk was in the middle. So it's not so much that we live in the middle, at least initially. It's more that whether it's in your small group or there are certain people that you're safe with that you can venture into the middle. And then the goal is to live there longer and longer and longer and longer. And people are not helpful at getting you to stay in the middle. They will say hurtful things to you, and they'll try to get you to see how bad you are, and
You're judging.
yeah,
Critical, and especially critical.
yeah.
Just thinking about raising kids and how to position, which you both can get into it a bit. How do you navigate if your wife sees a whole different way? Going along the example you gave, right? Pay or not pay, this is one example, or discipline, or whatever the case may be. just talk about best way to kind of approach that with the spouse if you're very much in a difference of direction.
So you
Not that
say,
anybody else has had that problem. I'll follow that story.
You say to your
Any
wife-
thoughts around that? Any direction?
you say to your wife, I heard this experienced speaker in Orlando and he brought up an idea.
Texting her right now. I'm saying it's about the sorry, about me always making the kids say sorry.
What's your first name?
Chris.
Chris.
Yeah. It's
I'm going to tell you this with all my might. I used that strategy my kids' entire childhood, and it works. If you respect each other. And it's a gift to your kids.
What strategy?
Talking in front of them.
Yeah.
Good strategy.
So I would bring my daughter in and say, I wanted you to know what we're talking about, but it's my turn to decide. I don't feel good about your sleepover. Mom thinks it's okay. It's my turn to decide. And one of the reasons that I don't feel good about it is because Jenny's going to be there and I'm not sure I trust her. Okay. Now she's going to be mad at me. I didn't say telling the truth doesn't take a risk, but then my wife says, I'm okay with Jenny, and I kind of trust this house, but it's Dad's decision. I was doing a brake job in my garage one time, and my daughter came out, and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, Mom just took the car away from me for a week, and it's not fair, and I know you wouldn't have done it. And what I did wasn't that bad. And I looked up at her and I said, you must have really pissed her off. And I said this, you're right, I wouldn't have taken it for a week. But your mom sees things that I don't see. And if you can incorporate that, it takes a while, but if you can incorporate that into your home, you will not only decrease the stress at home, but you're preparing your kids 20 years later for a marriage. Because we just don't get that much example. I mean, we're threatened by people that disagree. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I could say to my family, you know, I could say to my kids that I probably have. You know, I grew up in a disengaged family, and my wife grew up in an enmeshed family. So we're going to see things different. But you're the beneficiary of that. I never saw that. I never saw two sides to the story growing up. And you get to. So, yeah.
This is kind of a bigger question.
Okay.
I work cross-culturally.
Okay.
A lot of people view things very differently than I. I get asked, do you think today we are more racially polarized than we ever have been? It's kind of or culturally polarized. And the first answer is yes. You know, everybody wants us to be more in the middle, civil. Or is it that we're just more honest? White people have been thinking the thoughts that are being expressed for years, they just haven't said it out. People of color have been thinking thoughts for years, they're saying it now. What do you think?
Couple comments on that. One, I think that the only way we're going to heal racial problems is for two things. One is for me to be more inclusive and accepting and gracious than my dad was, and to be less judgmental and more inclusive than I was 2 years ago. If our whole country could be moving that direction, we'll make more progress than pointing out at people, you said this, you said that. I don't know how racially charged our country is. I don't even, it's very confusing to me. I think we're getting more and more aware of political correctness, but I don't really know. Somebody in politics last week said I'm colorblind, and the press was all over them. I don't know. I don't know what's in their heart. We have a long ways to go. And I think the progress that we make will be incremental. It won't be from marches, and it won't free from antagonism, and so.
My son is marrying a white girl this August. And my sister is so outraged about this. We are fine. Myself and my wife are fine. Because my son went to Notre Dame and going to a school that was predominantly white.
Yes.
And the same thing was at his high school. The young generation are going to school together. And they're finding out that what their parents told them about the other people are not true. Because they're in class with them, they do projects with them, they do sports with them. It's completely not true. So we have a new generation, just this question, that is becoming more racially reconciled than the past generation because of this stuff. Because what you don't know, you don't know. Somebody can tell you a story about you.
Right.
When I know you, I say, wow, that man is a good man. What you're saying is not true. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I don't know if it helps.
I agree.
Yeah.
Completely. Yep. Anybody else? Yep.
Yeah, you talked about telling the truth.
Yep.
And it seems like that's one of the hard things, and telling the truth helps people be grounded in reality. But we have such a post-truth culture. Like, how do we navigate what is true when we have different people with different really realities sometimes in terms of how they see things, and when people say things like, well, you're using an alternate set of facts, how do we parent through that? When there's so many,
yeah.
We're in this weird space.
Sure. And, as you get more courageous with saying your truth, you also have to become more humble to say, but I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. So the hardest things I've ever said to my kids, I always ended with, I very well could be wrong. One of my kids was engaged in dating a person that I didn't think was a good fit for them. And I said that. And I said that with kind of dad fear and trembling. But I felt like I had created a home where my kids counted on me to say the truth, even if it hurt. And so I ended it by saying, I very well could be wrong. I don't know what your conversations are like in private, but this is what I see. I committed to you long ago that I would tell you what I saw. Yes.
Having raised two millennials, we've been down this road a little bit, and would you agree with the statement, I think this is what I'm coming to, I really cannot claim truth with a capital T to own that. All I can do is say, this is my opinion, this is why, and that's about it.
Yep. And that's good enough. I mean, certainly you've learned something over the years, and a lot of us have bias in our opinions, and but we can't let that keep us from talking out loud to people that we love. Some of the most powerful, life-changing things people have said to me took a big risk on their part to say it. Yeah.
So I really learned a lot from your message on how talking is the primary sort of like driver for shame if we talk too much. And I'm guilty as hell on that front, so that's why I'm here and grateful. What about the positive though? What about like speaking life, encouraging words, how effective, how valuable is sort of positive speech in this whole equation?
Personally, I think encouragement is way overrated. Part of it is that if I encouraged my kid 10 times a day, then they're going to wonder what's wrong that I only encouraged them 6 times that day. So there's kind of a quota component to it. I mean, I played a lot of sports growing up, and the coaches that I had were really encouraging. I started wondering what I did wrong when they didn't encourage me. And so there's a quota problem with that. There's another thing that I know we're supposed to be done. Do you mind if I tell you a quick story? I was leading a men's group, and this guy broke down and he was in tears. You're going to think that I'm crazy and that I'm very mean-spirited person. But he's telling us about how he's broken and his marriage is a mess and that he doesn't feel like he belongs and he didn't growing up. And one of the guys in the group says, "What can we do for you?" And he said, "I just need some encouragement." And I said, "Time out." And everybody looked at me and I said, "We're going to take a bathroom break here. And before we spend 20 minutes encouraging Jeff, I want after the bathroom break to Jeff to tell us how long that encouragement will last." So we all went to the bathroom, we came back in the room, we gathered, and I said, "I want to pick up where we left off. You were pouring your heart out, you had tears, everybody in the group wanted something from you, wanted to give you something. They asked you what you needed, you said encouragement. So now I want to hear from you what encouragement will do for you." And Jeff looked at the group and he said, and this was about 10 at night, it was an evening group. He said, "Whatever you guys said wouldn't last till breakfast." And I said, "Well, then it doesn't make much sense for us to spend 40 minutes encouraging you." And later on, years later, Jeff called me and he said that was a turning point in his life. He said, "Remember that time in that group when I asked for encouragement and you asked me how long it would last? What changed for me is that I'm 48 years old and I have asked my parents and my first wife and my second wife to fill me with something they can't fill me with. I'm an empty person, I feel empty, and I keep wanting other people to love me so I don't have to learn to love myself." So, the other problem with encouragement just is, I always wonder when people say my ministry is encouragement, it's like, what do you encourage people to do? Stay in your job? I encourage you to leave the job, to leave a marriage, to stay in a marriage? I'm not smart enough to know what to encourage somebody to do. So, I mean, there can be some encouragement like you'll be fine or whatever, but man, I get very far into encouragement and I'm telling people decisions to make about their life that I don't feel qualified to make. So the main encouragement I give people is you're on the right track, keep working, keep at it. The most terrifying thing that I can imagine is if, and this is really true in Minnesota, but imagine that I was going into fall and winter and I didn't know spring was coming. Imagine every day is getting shorter and colder and darker.
And there's no hope.
And there would be literally people jumping off bridges. But they don't jump off bridges because there's somebody that's been there before that says, I know what January and February look like, but I promise you May is coming. And that's the role that we can have. And I think that's probably the most powerful part of encouragement is, I know it looks dark, I know it looks cold.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
So I have been a lifelong over-talker with my kid. I happen to be a lawyer, and how do I transition from lecturing them about every single aspect of life to this? Do I just go cold turkey, or is there some sort of transition ceremony that, some sort of ritual?
Well, from my experience, I would say that you would absolutely be shocked to know how many things you said that didn't need to be said.
No, I wouldn't be shocked. I get it now. I've been going through this whole time going.
When my kids were like this and they did something wrong, what I would usually say to them is, you need to go to your room for 10 minutes, and if you want to know why, you can ask me when you get out. In their entire childhood, they never asked me why. That tells me that all that stuff that I would have said about why they're going to their room, they didn't need it.
So I should just start living differently, or do I need to tell them, like, don't be
No,
surprised
you-
if I stop talking?
What you need to do is this. You
Yeah.
need a new roadmap.
Yeah.
You need to, over and over and over, just as you're sitting around the house, did I need to say that? Did I need to say that? Did I need to say that? Did I need to say that?
I'm walking that journey.
Do you have copies
All
of
right.
your
Yeah, I think so. If they're out of books, I have 4 or 5 in my hotel room, so come and find me.
The way that you dealt with Jeff and did not go down the encouragement route, were you not shattering that false dichotomy?
Yes.
Because he's living here or here. It's like, no, I'm not going to allow you to keep on. It seems like
Yeah.
you're shattering that whole
Exactly.
false dichotomy.
He was in tears because that's how he saw himself, and the group said, what do you need from us? And he said, I need to be reminded that this is me.
And that's what you demolished.
Yeah. And you know what? If he had said, I think it would last a year, I would have said, okay, let's go for it. We can all stay 40 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Invest in that.
But it doesn't last a year. I knew that. So, all right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.